Goedenavond, bonsoir. C'est chaud, donc j'espère que ça va aller. C'est aussi une idée drôle d'avoir et une conférence et une ouverture d'expo, mais donc ça veut dire que vous êtes prêts pour un double or nothing. Wat Iwan is vergeten te zeggen, de lezing zal in het Engels doorgaan. Donc la conférence sera en anglais. And this is actually for practical reasons, because we had many questions about translation. So it seemed, could we dim the light a bit, please, because you can really... Yeah, thank you. I think it's the easiest way to do so. Double or nothing. Before I start, I also would like to thank, and now I'm looking into a dark space, which is really nice. I would like to thank, in a way from the bottom of my heart, my two partners, Johan Andres and Freek Persen, but also all the people in the office before I start giving the lecture, because they made this possible. And I will come back to this later, this kind of collaboration, but I can assure you it's not self-evident to work together. It's very exciting, but it's not self-evident. I would also like to thank Beaux-Arts, but for this very generous invitation for the conference, but also for the exhibition. And I also would like to thank Architectural Association, because they, together with Beaux-Arts, managed to get the book ready in time. And to be honest, we think it's a very good book, which synthesizes the things we want to say at this stage in time on our work. Both the exhibition, the lecture, and the book have the same title, Double or Nothing. Double or Nothing means raising ambition, enhancing the ambition. And I think each project that we venture into, we try to, maybe not double, but we try to enhance the ambition of the project. We also try to enhance the ambition of the clients, and we try to enhance the ambition of ourselves. So it's a kind of triple strategy. The reason why we want to enhance the ambition is that because we want to really stress the fact that what we're doing, architecture, space, public space, really should radiate a sense of urgency. I think there are too many things being built, too many plans being made, which don't radiate this sense of urgency. And actually, this Double or Nothing really also aims at the fact that this is serious business. This is not innocence, this is making society. Also, Double or Nothing, for me anyway, that's my personal reading of it, means that we try to rule out the gray zone in between. I think that's very important. So it's either double, maybe, or nothing. And I would gladly choose nothing if that double is impossible. Both options for me, in a way, are valuable while we engage in a project. I would like to start with this image. It's an image I only received last week. And for me, in a way, it synthesizes what we try to do, what we're interested in. Although it looks very banal. It's a street somewhere in Cairo. And it looks like European street. And everything is there. We have pavement, we have cars, we have trees. And all of a sudden there's one element, namely the tree, which bursted out of this shell, let's say. It's in a way too big. And also here, I mean, there are two ways of approaching this situation. So either you could say, well, this is actually blocking my way, shit. Or you could say, well, this is rather interesting, and how am I to engage with this situation? What is my position towards this apparent obstacle? And trying to go beyond the tree probably will mean rubbing the tree or getting into a kind of frictionless situation. The whole operation with 5.4e, the last 12 years, revolves more or less around this principle. It's principle of suspension of disbelief. And suspension of disbelief, and in a way, this is also what I'm going to ask you tonight, to suspend your disbelief, which means trying to believe what I'm going to show you, although maybe you know it's not true, maybe it's silly, maybe it's too speculative, or maybe it's just wrong. But try to engage in this trip, suspend your disbelief. And from the tree to this, in a way, is very, it's almost the same. It's the Lawrencean library of Michelangelo in Firenze. Probably you all know this work. And again here, something really strange happens. It's a scale clash. The stair, which is in front of the entrance of the library, although we're already inside, but you could have the impression that you're actually still outside. This is a kind of urban setting. And nothing in this setting shows its real scale. So you could imagine that somebody's this tall or somebody's this tall. So again, for us, it's an image full of suspense, full of things to experience. And we found the same kind of suspense here in Palais des Beaux-Arts. This is the sculpture hall in 29 for the Bourdelle exhibition. And just by placing these gigantic monumental statues, the whole scale of this hall, which is already very ambivalent, changes again. And these kind of situations, these kind of almost misunderstandings that we are interested in. Another misunderstanding, in a way, or misuse, a football field somewhere in Albania. And next to the football field there's a construction site, and all of a sudden it's used as a stand. Without any security issues. But all of a sudden, if you venture into this situation, you get the most fantastic view on the play. And we like this image so much that it became the cover image of the book, the Double or Nothing book. So this Double or Nothing will be, of course, the theme of the lecture, but I'm not going to repeat each time what is now double or nothing. It's up to you also to decide or to figure out. But I'm going to try to show you some projects in a random order where this sensitivity or this interest is actually an underlying score. First, we start with sustainability, because we have to talk about sustainability, so let's do it immediately, then we're in a way also rid of it. Office Plus is a study. No, I mean, I'm kidding, okay? The sustainability is important. Before I get there. Office Plus is a climate-sensitive office. So it's not a sustainable office, but it's a climate-sensitive office. So there's a difference. This was a study which was granted to us by like 4 years ago by the Rijksbouwmeester in Holland. And in Holland they use the green calc method to calculate sustainability. And the index starts at 100. And as you go, as it becomes more and more sustainable, so 180 is the actual standard of these days. So it's a bit like with a fridge. But the question of the Rijksbouwmeester was actually, what if we would reach 350, which is like 3.5 times more what the standard is. So what if in 10 years' time, maybe 15 years' time, we would like to try to reach 350? This is beyond passive, in a way. So we start with 100. We do some recuperation of water, go to 120. Timber construction, go to 144. Pre-cooling of air, sending air through a labyrinth, 216. And soil storage, which gives us 234 index. But still this 350 jump, in a way, we're not there yet. So all these technical methods, all these technical aids, they're not sufficient to reach this beyond standard. And if we look at the office today, the standard office, and this is an office from the 50s, but it's in a way still the office today, you have a kind of constant temperature, 222 degrees, for instance. Although outside, let's say, the temperature changes. So we could imagine that also inside the condition changes according to the outside. This was the starting point, thermos, with multiple layers. And we devised an office building in layers, a bit like a kind of onion peel. So the middle space is the climate office, is actually the usual office as we know it. It's insulated and conditioned. And then inside there is a space which is quite huge. It's insulated but not conditioned because it actually feeds in a way its energy from the surrounding ring. And then the outside ring, which we call the greenhouse, is not insulated, not conditioned. And if we would cut through such a building, and at this stage in the testing it was circular, it doesn't have to be circular of course. So we have this first middle zone, the climate office, which is normal temperature, normal situation. The overflow space, the middle space. The overflow space is double high in order also to compensate the fact that it lies deeper, so in order to attract more daylight, but also to be more spacious, to be more oxygenous. And of course the greenhouse, which is the thinnest layer but still inhabitable, is, like I said, non-conditioned and non-insulated. Which means that according to the figures 4 years ago, 1/3 of the surface is actively climatized, generating a climate-dependent building that can be fully utilized the whole year through, or well, 80% of the whole year, without any loss of comfort, which is a lot. So that means that we still have to think about the 20%, which is not covered yet. So in a normal situation, everybody is everywhere. And at extreme temperatures, all of a sudden people group in this middle ring, which means that you, thinking about sustainability is really also thinking about, in a way, or allowing for a certain level of discomfort, meaning that you have to change your habits. So it's not a one-to-one relationship as what we know now, but if we really want to go sustainable, it means that during winter, for instance, that this climate zone in the middle is densely populated. But it also can have its advantages. So summer, fully utilized, winter, kind of compressed office building. Which means that you, all of the time, you have to negotiate your own position towards space, but also towards the people you work with. And at the moment, it's a very abstract diagram, but it's the same principle. So the greenhouse, the climate office, and the overflow space. We're developing this concept for an office building somewhere in France, hoping that it can be built, because we really think that this is, in a way, the way to go ahead. So to create difference in spaces. So as you can see here, the overflow space is double high. And the normal offices are, in a way, normal, but quite narrow, and the greenhouse as a kind of cover. This is one possibility, of course, to think about sustainability. But like I said, it means changing your habits. It means like being confronted with this tree that you actually have to negotiate. You have to think. And the same thing, in a way, goes for our office. This is the office in Molenbeek. Also, we're located in a spot in the city where we constantly have to think, we have to negotiate, we have to define our position. And the same thing, in a way, goes for the people who work at the office. You see some people here trying to also negotiate their way through Brussels public space. The reason why I want to broach this subject is to, in a way, state that the office that we run is a tough office in a certain way. I mean, there is in a way no mercy. And we expect this suspension of disbelief, not only from ourselves, which is a very hard task every day, but also for the people who work for us. And yeah, again, still, I don't know where they are. I don't say it often, but I'm really grateful that they are willing, in a way, to spend their time, their energy, their thoughts, their intelligence with us in order to go beyond even toxic. But at the same time, because the office is so demanding, we each time, let's say, flow in a certain mode of doubt. This is one of the former collaborators. I think somewhere very late at night, very solitary, and filled with doubt. And in a way, it's not really bad to have these doubts coming to the exhibition itself, which you can hopefully see later on, or maybe later, because it's an exhibition. I mean, in a way, I would recommend you to come back later, because it's an exhibition you have to take time for, to look at, to study, and preferably not to be alone, but not with 500 people. This quote by Voltaire, "Le doute est désagréable, mais la certitude est ridicule." This is actually what I think what we do for the last 10, 12 years. But in a way, we didn't know that we were doing this that we were actually feeding on doubt as a kind of motor catalyst to come to answers, hopefully intelligent answers, but still allowing this doubt in the discussions, in the search for answers. And it was actually because of the exhibition, and because we asked somebody to be the curator of the exhibition, it's Dominique Boudet. It's Dominique Boudet. That this quote actually, I mean, it was Dominique who put it, I think, on the table. And Dominique Boudet is, as you can see here also in the picture, I think he's the most, he's mad about architecture, he's mad about space. He's constantly asking things, he's also constantly doubting. And for the last 2 years, when we worked with Dominique for this exhibition, he, in a way, transposed this doubt, also even more so, on the office. And in a way, I'm very grateful to him that he did so. He even had another title in his mind for the exhibition, was La Machine à douter, which didn't make it. But, and it's maybe in a way because also Dominique is a kind of machine à douter. We saw each other, I think, like 2 or 3 years ago for the first time. This was the first meeting, and I think he was still doubting there also. But as we went along, also started, he misspelled the name of the office, which is good. He corrected it. And we had this numerous talks over the last 2 years, very intense talks, very difficult talks. In that sense, I consider Dominique a bit as a part of the office now, in the sense that he, sometimes we were annoying each other so much, like Johan Freek and I are annoying each other so much often. So the whole thing became one big machine to try to develop this logic for the exhibition. And coming to the issue of exhibiting architecture, I think there is, I think it's one of the most difficult things to do, and I'm pretty much sure that exhibiting architecture is impossible. So you have to find other ways. So maybe we're not exhibiting architecture upstairs, we're doing something else. And during these talks, I remember the first time we presented to Dominique, I think like 50 projects, 5-0. And gradually, so each time we had to prove or argue why a project would be sufficient enough or intelligent enough to make it into the exhibition. I think we ended up with 27 projects, 28 projects. I like these pictures a lot. It's like, aha, yeah, this, and then still again doubting. And so we went on and on and on, but I think we made it, and I think the exhibition upstairs really is, for us anyway, a powerful tool to renegotiate our position towards what we're trying to do. The place itself, although it's hot inside here, but we're actually located in a fantastic building. It's Palais de Beaux-Arts, and for us it was the only place we actually wanted to exhibit in. And maybe this sounds arrogant, but it's true, because it's in Belgium anyway. I think the only place which is open enough, which is urban enough to allow for architectural exhibition in a proper, loose, contracted way. It's a bit like the building, which the way it sets in the urban fabric allows people from the high city to the low city to linger, flâner. Ce sont des flâneurs qui utilisent le bâtiment. And also when you see the plan by Horta, and I'm still doubting whether it's a genius plan or a non-genius plan, but I think it's a genius plan. I assume that it's a genius plan. This whole building, we actually wanted to make also a statement about being present in this building in Brussels with the work we're trying to do. And you probably know how architecture is exhibited in the Palais des Beaux-Arts. And from the very first moment with Beaux-Arts, with Ivan, we entered into kind of discussion to see what could be the best location to not present only the work, but also present the Palais des Beaux-Arts, or to represent the Palais des Beaux-Arts. And we discarded this parcours, the usual parcours, and we picked the salle de foyer 4 and the salle de conseil. But we also picked one extra space on the other side of the Horta hall, in order to also be able to use the Horta hall as part of the, well, not the exhibition, but what we wanted to state. The Horta hall itself is a kind of impossible room with dimensions which are in a way larger than life. And again, this is a space where this suspension of disbelief could very well work, or should very well work. And these three spaces, this one is in a way a new space, it's part of the white box. These three spaces actually give on to the Horta hall, and they're designed now as cul-de-sac. So you go in, where you go in, you go out. So there is no way of, you always come back to the Horta hall. In the sense that this becomes then not only the central point of the building, but also the central point of the exhibition. And in a way it's maybe strange to do so, because if you see the plan with all these kind of, it's a very transparent plan. In a way, it's what we're trying to do is to enhance the fact or the realization that you're actually in this kind of building. That it's not self-evident that you go from space to space, but that each time you come back and you look back, or you look for another space and you come back and you look back for another space. This one, the salle de conseil, which you probably know, is again double high, but it's one of the most difficult spaces to exhibit in. And bearing in mind the title of Double or Nothing, we're going for a nothing now. We actually had a plan in mind, a concept in mind, where because we wanted to open up the spaces, so this was an existing entrance, this is a existing but quite new entrance, and here there is no entrance, you have to go through here. And we actually talked to Beaux-Arts and said, actually, we want to use also part of the budget to maybe be part of the renovation. So the plinth is missing, so we will add a black marble plinth, but also a black marble door, which could give access to the Salle de Conseil in a very direct way. This didn't happen. We were so close, but Heritage said no. And we went back and said no again. And then we said, okay, we don't have time anymore. But maybe in the future, I know Paul Dujardin is a very big fan of the concept. So maybe in the future this will be realized, because we think it could be very worthwhile, because the Salle de Conseil is the only space around the Hortahal which is not immediately accessible from the Hortahal. So this was a nothing, but we tried to deal with the nothing, so the 3 spaces. But we were also interested in choosing the spaces or to block the spaces so that all of a sudden double readings could appear. And for instance, this small space, and I invite you later on to go into this small space, is actually also giving on to the Cinematheque. And this is the genius of this building. Everything is connected with everything. So in a way you go mad in this building because there is no order apparent. But it's fantastic to use it for the exhibition. So this small space, in a way, is doubled, even tripled, by the fact that it's giving on to the one of the foyers of the Cinematheque. So this is the first space, dealing with one project, one house, which I show later on. But again, in a way, almost showing the project in this space is almost secondary to the fact that this space is used in such a way, this kind of mirroring way. The second space is the Hortahal. So in a way, we're dealing with 4 mini exhibitions in one. And this was still a simulation when we thought opening was going to be there, but you have to discard this. In the Hortahal, we're presenting 2 major works, also in a major way, on the scale of the Hortahal, but not simply showing architecture, but trying to acknowledge the fact that, like I said earlier on, exhibiting architecture in a way is impossible. So how can you show this impossibility? How can you show the fact that, in a way, it's not real? Showing architecture is not real. And we asked for these 2 projects. On the left, the tower, TID Tower in Tirana, Albania. On the right, Sea Mine, Genk, refurbishment of an old industrial site into a cultural infrastructure. We asked Philippe Dujardin to make these impossible representations of these 2 projects. And it's quite subtle. I mean, this is a view you can never have in reality. I'm not going to explain you why or not. You have to go on site to check, but this you can never see. And the fact that this is now hanging big in the Hortahal as seemingly an architectural reality, but it's not, we think it's quite exciting. The same thing goes for the tower, and it's different, but the tower, apart from the fact that it's presented horizontally, the tower is actually derived from its context, and also this I explained briefly later on. So the tower, in a way, is context. The tower is here shown without context. It's shown as almost like an object, almost without scale. And I think that's very important for these 2 images, is that they once were models, they were built, and in a way, in the Hortahal, they are brought back to their status of models, looking real. We should think about this. Third room is called 27 Short Stories. It's presenting 27 projects, and this was also, I think, in a way, the idea that Dominique Boudet had to represent the work, not to represent it as something final, something ongoing, something in the make, and to show it as short stories. So each time picking one element, one crucial aspect of each project, and putting this aspect, or bringing this aspect to the fore. And the room in that sense, and this is one of the very early on models, so the room looks completely different as you see here, but the room is filled with 27 clues, but at the same time will probably also leave you with 27 questions. So probably in this room you will come back with more questions than answers. But in a way it's a kind of study. This room is a kind of study where you hopefully could take your time and to dug into the projects and try to understand why this specific aspect is shown in the exhibition. And then finally the fourth room, the Salle de Conseil, is the Tirana room. We, together with Dominique, we decided to group Tirana projects because being in Brussels, even the name of the office is Brussels, and feeling all the difficulties we have to function in Brussels, and then seeing how we operate in Tirana, Albania, since 6 years now, which is 10 times more difficult in a way than Brussels, but also 10 times more willing to achieve something than Brussels. So we found this quite interesting to use this Tirana synthesis of a couple of projects to try to comment also the Brussels situation, or to comment the situation. You will see a big projection of a Tirana drive from the airport to the city center. You will see a text by Ismail Kadare, which is, let's say, the most famous, even notorious writer, Albanian writer. You will see a small movie on the tower. You will see a small movie on Skanderbeg Square, the main square. And on the right, on the TV, you will see a film by Andri Sala, Albanian artist, who's actually filming Edi Rama, the mayor of Tirana, in his reflections on the fact that he has, the last years, he has colored the city center of Tirana. I will show this later. So, if you will, this is the exhibition, briefly. I'm going to go through a couple of projects, also, hopefully briefly. But starting from this, from Tirana, or the fact that what we're doing there now, A, building a high-rise building, and B, building the most central public square of the country, and how we can also translate this to, for instance, the Brussels context. This is an image from Sao Paulo, which we like a lot because it actually shows that small scale and big scale can actually function quite well together. The one doesn't have to rule out the other. If we go back to Brussels, and maybe this is a project you know, it's from 2003. It's a fictitious project. There's no client. It was at the time when Xavier de Donia had this idea of, from his balcony, so everything he could see from the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, which is higher than La Grande Place, had to go. And you have to name me one city which is dealing with its recent history in such a way. I can't think of any city. And in a way, as a reaction to this, and also on the occasion of our first book back then, we developed this project. It's, in a way, it's a flimsy project. It's a statement project. But it's about high-rise, and to think about high-rise in the sense that high-rise can also be something complex. 3 high-rises connected with a new ground floor level at 150 meters high. On the right, water purification center, because it was connected to the canal. It's actually standing in the canal. This is Quartier Nord, canal. Housing and offices, and on this level we thought it would be ideal for all the services of Brussels, the population services. So each time there was a birth, each time there's a death, each time there's a marriage, you could have this kind of fantastic moment with the city, engaging with the city. And on top of this platform, you had a small skyscraper, Brussels size, which was a hotel. I think 6 years later, we're facing this, more or less on the same spot. And let's say, although this is like I said, in a way, a flimsy project, a statement project, not meant to be built. This is meant to be built, and we could imagine that if we think about the Sao Paulo image, where high-rise and low density together form a complexity of their own, that maybe here there is still some chances to be taken or to be developed. And then swiftly going on to the tower we're making in Tirana, which is near completion. Tirana is this. It's a kind of big sprawl center. And all this is more or less illegally built. But Tirana at the same time has enormous qualities. It's very compact organization. It has beautiful climate, beautiful light because of the dust. There's a lot of dust in the air. Lots of Mercedes. But also low-tech building methods. So we arrived in Tirana in a way by accident. But we were immediately confronted by the fact that what we thought we knew about building, it was worth nothing. So in a way we had to reprogram completely, 100%, and start from scratch, learn in a way how to build in Tirana, but also learn how to deal with the context. And this is what I mentioned before, Rama, the mayor, who's been painting buildings, often illegal buildings or illegal buildings. And it's a kind of very quick method of showing, and I mean, you can like this or you can dislike this, in a way it doesn't matter. It's not about beautiful or ugly. But it's a very quick method of showing the people from Tirana, who come, let's say, from communism, pyramid games in the 90s, which made the whole economy collapse. So their sense of society is completely gone. And this, in a way, is a method, not the method, but a method to make them feel that they're actually part of a bigger whole, part of a society. So, and this is Rama, former artist, now mayor. And Rama has this, this plan, this crazy plan, to try to deal with the Tirana context in a contemporary way. This is an image of the center of Tirana, with old remnants of communism, amongst others. And the tower we're building at the moment is quite near to the center, so this is Skanderbeg Square. And it's part of a master plan. In a way, there were 10 towers planned, but they will never be built. We're dealing with this tower on this location. On the location is the monument for the founder of city of Tirana, Süleyman Pasha. And already there it starts, so the clash of scales, the impossibility of building something new against or next to something more than holy. And the tower project in itself, I'm not going to explain the whole project because it would take me too long. But in a way, it's not about the tower, it's not about the architecture, but it's about the light and how to capture the light. And this is the first model we made. It goes from an ellipse to a rectangle. And this was what interested us, how the whole shape could capture the light. So superposition of all the floors. This is the lowest floor, upper floor. And you get this kind of vase-like volume, which is programmed with different functions, from commercial to housing, or it could be housing, it will be offices and some public functions. This is how we try to deal with the Süleyman Pasha impasse. And this was during the competition, because it was a competition, this was the proposal we made. We thought we had to be very inventive and very So we made this kind of, we made up some kind of structure because it's earthquake territory. We also made up this kind of skin, kind of moucharabia skin. And we were, in a way, making the project very, very complex without knowing it. Because, again, we didn't know the context of Tirana yet. After winning the competition, we got an engineer and also a client who was, in a way, he was completely convinced about the whole structure. So he said, well, let's build it. Let's make a mock-up to actually show that they could build it. But you have to know that each of these beams have different lengths. The whole tower through. So in a way, it could be built, but it would cost so much money. It wouldn't be clever to do so. So we managed to convince the client of going for a more normal way of building, inclined columns. And also trying to reconsider what we proposed in the during the competition, to reconsider the skin, also make the skin, let's say, in a way, as stupid as possible, so that it could be built with low-tech meanings. So we tested one-to-one different variations, because the one thing we knew was that we wanted to go for a ratio of 50-50, so 50 open, 50 closed, because it's Mediterranean climate. Also, what you have to know is that it's extremely dirty. There's a lot of dust, so you can't make a glass building over there. So it should be a building which can get dirty. And I'm now making like a shortcut of 2 or 3 years, we arrived at this principle where each floor is actually surrounded by 44 triangles, and the inclination of these triangles shifts as you go along. So at the bottom it's very sharp, and as you go along they become more and more flat, which means that we can, with one panel, one size, we can clad the whole tower in such a way. And let's say the astuce is this, the fact that they don't touch, because this super ellipse shape is completely three-dimensional. So if you would think of the Gherkin, for instance, in London, I mean, we didn't have these kind of budgets to cover the facade in such a way, so we had to find ways and making use of the fact that the eye, in a way, is lazy and reads this as a kind of continuous skin. But at the same time, it was also about dealing with the scale of the city and dealing with the scale of the building. So using these panels, which they're quite high, they could be sensed as very high balconies. It's a bit, again, like with the tree, so it's in a way too big to be normal. But it makes you, in a way, it opens up the view. By blocking it, it opens up the view. So it engages you with the landscape. And again, we still have this potential of filtering the light, capturing the light, making mock-ups. They like making mock-ups. So and also this, in a way, it's a very important image, because, like I said, you have to forget everything you think you know. This building, for instance, is the first building in Albania where there are construction site meetings. It's the first building where we comply to international standards. But that means also renegotiating your ways of dealing with the construction site. So Johan Andres, the partner who is often on site, or almost always on site, devised a system where he projects on a whiteboard, because the contractors, they can't fully read the plans. So we have a problem, so they have to execute the plans, but not really able. So we draw at the same time with the contractors on this plan, and by drawing, we actually also know that they understand, and that we are quite sure that we can go ahead, even though it's still a very low-tech way of building, but that they can manage. So this whole building, in a way, it's about filtering views, filtering light, and again, being present in the city, but also giving a very clear signal to the city that in a way it's like painting the facades, but it's a three-dimensional way of giving the same kind of signal. I think, as you can see here on this picture, this issue of scale, I think it works quite well. So it's not too big, and at the same time it challenges the scale the city has today. Also the way the whole, in a way, it's not only a tower, of course, it's a kind of a base, and the way it stands on the floor, on the ground floor with a small galleria, so it becomes a small part of the city, ready to be enlarged, ready to be continued. And this is the view from Skanderbeg Square, where you also can see, and this is Skanderbeg, you have the clock tower, mosque, and the TID tower. And although they're from different times, although they're from different beliefs almost, in some strange way they start to make up comprehensive whole, comprehensive way of dealing with the city. Briefly staying in Tirana, Skanderbeg Square is a project we developed with Andri Sala, so the artist from who you can see a work upstairs. And this is another work of Andri in Mexico City. And we wanted to work with Andri Sala on this central square, but not we as architects and he as an artist, but in a way in a complete team. And because the answer we had to figure out for this question, this very complex question of how to make public space in a city where there are no certainties, or there were no certainties, where citizens actually don't know who or what they are and how to behave in this new constellation, in this post-communist constellation. Although they're very apt in using almost the derelict state the city is in. But thinking of Skanderbeg Square, and this is the former situation, but on the 1st of May, so when there are no cars. But normally this is kind of the biggest roundabout of the country for cars. So seeing this square has a lot of potential. And just showing you a quick movie. This is Tirana. So the idea is actually in this sprawl to make almost top-down in a way a space, an oxygenous space from this. But also a space which can actually deal with the fact that around this current square there are buildings, there are monuments which are in a way they kind of testimony of Tirana's culture, of its history, and it's not always pretty, it's not always beautiful, but nevertheless making a space which could deal with this. The former master plan, which was developed by Architecture Studio, actually foresaw a new square by building new small buildings. So in a way, eradicating all these communist buildings, hiding them. And we wanted to do, in a way, the complete opposite. So making a square where every piece of history was actually on the square. So there was no way of escaping. The square itself is a slight pyramid. Slight pyramid, not for the sake of a pyramid, but in order to, in a way, break the square. But also, all these huge monuments have these kind of stairs. So all of a sudden, people on the square, on the middle of the square, are looking above these pedestals. These pedestals, which are, or back then, were actually meant to frighten people to actually enter the building. Around the square, there will be also kind of a green ring buffering the square. And also on the square, and this is not for the sake of happiness or the sake of, there will be water features. Water features, of course, in order to install on the square moments of doubt, moments of interference, where all of a sudden water starts to arise. So you have to, again, each time renegotiate your position. This is the underground of the square with all the tubes for the water. And this is a simulation of the water at its highest speed. Because again, I mean, the water is of course for leisure, but also for cleaning. So it has to be quite powerful. So these were tests in a laboratory in order to see what kind of speed should be reached. Sorry. Mm-hmm. So this is now ongoing. Construction site is ongoing. This is what we encounter on the site. And you start very gradually to see the contour of the space. We're not there yet. It goes very slow. We're not sure when it will be finished. But I think it will certainly have an effect. Although, again, I mean, all of this so far, what I said, in a way, is very innocent, but making public space in a city like Tirana, but maybe in any kind of city, this is kind of riots January, early this year in Tirana. So making this public space, in a way, is not innocent. So we have to be ready also for these kind of encounters. And if I would transfer this to Brussels, and I just got called that I only have 20 minutes, so I have still a lot more to say, but we'll see where we arrive at. Brussels also, in a way, is a city which, in a way, has difficulty in engaging with this public space. Leopold II, king urbanist, who actually managed, of course, with the wrong money, but who managed to make spaces of a certain scale. This is 1867, the Besem plan, with a ring where all these rich, in a way, very generous park infrastructures were built in a very short time. Can you see this? Yeah. So this is Leopold II, his intervention. So he has actually installed a scale on the city of Brussels, which still, until this day, in a way, defines the city of Brussels, and at the same time, on a political level, I think, also proves that we're not really capable of dealing with this scale in Brussels. And also, what is quite striking is there is a part missing. So the left part, Anderlecht, Molenbeek, is missing. You can also see it in the city fabric. It's quite dense. And on the contrary, I mean, it's a site where the abattoir is, where there's a big dénivelé, which has a lot of potential. And again, same thing as with the tower project. This is a project without a client, in a way. But at the moment, we're working on the study for Brussels 2040, so we decided to filter it in also in the study, although the study will be much richer and much more encompassing. But studying the plan, all of a sudden we saw this space, this, which is cut by the canal. This is the abattoir. And we could imagine 10, 15 years from now, I mean, there are a lot of industrial sites on the site, that we clean it up, that we actually add new city fabric to it, so that we regain a kind of public space of 400,000 square meters of a certain scale, which is more or less similar to the Leopold II infrastructure, which could also be compared, for instance, to La Villette or Tiananmen. And also could be compared to the Ibirapuera Park in Sao Paulo, although there it's much bigger, of course. But all of a sudden, this ring of parks could be completed with a new park, and this is an ongoing project, so I'm showing you work in progress. We don't know if it's a park, if it's public space of a different order, but we like this logic a lot. I think also for politicians, I think this could be one of the answers of dealing with public space in Brussels. I don't have 5 minutes of intelligence, so I have to... Should I present it or should I skip? Because, huh? Present? Okay, quick, 5 minutes. 5 minutes of intelligence. Also, that is something that arose only the last 3-4 years at the office. Of course, everybody has 5 minutes of intelligence now or then, but maybe it was as striking in the office that all of a sudden we... and we can't program this method of working, but it occurs every now and then. And I'll show you 3 small projects. This is project for a house. And remember that one of us had to go to the client and we didn't have a clue. And this was thrown together literally in even less than 5 minutes. The sketch idem dito. But the idea was to make a house which was composed out of 4 elements, as you can see here. I'm not going into detail of the program, but it's consistent with the program. But also thinking about how these 4 sub-houses could connect, how they could make maybe one house, or should they make one house. So the statement actually I want to put is that the 5 minutes of intelligence is a very exciting way of working, but most of the time it takes us like 1, 2, maybe 5 years to actually understand what this 5 minutes of intelligence actually meant. And so it's a kind of a very ongoing process of developing this house in this case. And this will go on site, construction site, next month. Something which is under construction right now. It's in a Flemish provincial city. Street, corner, this is the house, this is the garden. And they have a triangular site, which is bordered by 2 walls, 2 blind walls. And we thought at the beginning that we had the answer, and quite soon there was this kind of triangular small tower, slightly shifted into this vacant lot, with the facade, blind facade towards the garden, but very big openings towards the adjacent walls. So in order to have light filtered in. And also, of course, on top, to make a kind of skylight which would be self-explanatory. And searching for these dimensions which are almost too narrow. But the clients didn't like it. And then this all of a sudden arose. So somebody at the office took a paper, an A4 paper, and just shoved it in. And hey presto, we had a project. So, and you can also see it at the exhibition. It's A4, up, you apply it, and it fits in exactly. It's the right size for the pavilion. It's also the right way, all of a sudden the right way to look through the garden, kind of arch. And the third project, 5 minutes of intelligence, is again in Tirana, because we're not only doing big projects in Tirana, we're also doing some small projects and even some, in a way, troubleshooting projects where we try to help. I mean, this was, so it's a bridge project. Somebody missed the bridge, but and the pity thing was that the bridge, this, was already built. So, and we actually got the question to make a railing. It's just the people couldn't fall off, or cars couldn't fall off. Instead of making a railing, we added this space in order that the width of the bridge was wide enough to become more than a bridge. Again, this doubling. But also not making a railing, but making something like something which is 70 centimeters high and very deep. And to our big surprise, and a nice surprise, this whole infrastructure got used in a very haphazard way. So all of a sudden became a bookshop. So the bridge becomes something quite rich. Although it's built in a very poor way, it's built in a very straightforward way. It's nothing spectacular. But again, this is a kind of logic that we like, that we try to develop, not as a system, but as a very direct way of dealing with the urban situation. This is, it's in French, of course, le programme bis, something also that Dominique Boudet, during our talks the last 2 years, proposed. And in a way, this trying to define this doubling of ambition, so we get a question. And it's not because we want to be a pain in the ass, but normally we get a question and we re-question the question in a very thorough way, hoping that this will be again questions in order to arrive to hopefully an intelligent answer. So the original question that we receive, we never answer. And in a way, for us, it's not because we don't want to answer, because we see each time a lot of potential which is not addressed yet. And it would be a pity not to show this. And this project, in a way, does this. It's a project for Paris, competition, 2nd place, unfortunately. But, and you can see here, it's 4 offices, l'AUC, John Bosch, Dominique Lyon, and 514E. And it's was a competition for 350 dwellings in Paris 16e, so a very posh neighborhood with very luxurious, next to the running track. And quite in the center of Paris, of course. And the question for 350 dwellings equals, of course, unité d'habitation. But if you would, this is, I can't remember, I think it's 7 floors. So this was actually what they were asking for, this kind of imposing on the context. Of course, this was made impossible by tons of rules. But there were 2 things we decided quite immediately. A, that the original question, namely to divide these 350 dwellings into 4 buildings to make it more natural in the city. So each architect could do 1 building. We decided to venture into the option that the 4 offices would make 1 building together. The second thing we decided was that the building itself, in a way, should be more than just a building. It should relate to the city, the wider city of Paris. So as we zoom in, and you see these lines, which are viewing lines, this is the building, the end result. It's the end result of kind of a series of context relationships that we're trying to synthesize into 1 project, into 1 object. So each apartment had good views. Each apartment had outside space. Each apartment had the maximum, of course not 100%, but the maximum light condition. Which means that it's negotiating between a city block compactness and unité d'habitation compactness, but it becomes a kind of typology of its own, maybe a new Parisian typology. And what was even more interesting was that the splitting of the 4 buildings also complied with 50% of private housing and 50% of social housing. And also there we decided to put them into one building. And these were all decisions which were taken without being asked to do so. We ended second. This was, of course, one of the reasons. But nevertheless, we think it was an extremely interesting experience. Also to work with 4 architects on one building. 1 architect left, for instance. It happens. And also the result, in a way, is a building which is composed out of sub-buildings, but nevertheless is still in its functioning, in its also in its say public character, the open space, the shared space. They're all grouped in this building, so there are no individual territories. Making a small bridge to Brussels again, but probably this is a project you know. It's a café on the Rue de la Loi. Refurbishing, small budget. But if it's about this, le programme bis, or the double or nothing, this is, I say, one of the projects where it's put to its maximum. This is a question posed by a political party, CD&V, and they wanted an open house. And often political parties, when they ask for an open house, they want a big window where they can put their logo, and that is then the open house. We quite soon in the process, actually the first meeting, we said that we didn't want to do this. The only way we could proceed was if they allowed us to re-question the question, which they allowed us to. And we, after some thinking, we proposed them to make a space, the ground floor space, to give it to the public, to make it into a public space. Small cafe, 35 people. And the entrance for the CD&V is here, so it's really on the side. So all of a sudden this becomes maybe also the symbol, if they want, for the political party, but moreover also the symbol for maybe how to deal with Brussels and how to deal with this kind of almost violent neighborhoods or violently passive neighborhoods, which is the European quarter. So we made or proposed a space. As you can see also, it's lower than the outside space. And everything, let's say, the intimacy of this space and the directness and almost harshness of this highway blend perfectly together in this one moment. Also acoustically, the thing is completely split, so you don't hear the street. The whole cafe is really designed as a real cozy cafe. We asked Nathalie Dewey to make the fixtures, the lights, so that it's like a real space, and nothing in this space actually reminds you to this political party per se. We even have a deal in a way, well, it's a spoken deal, but nevertheless for me it's a deal, that even during elections there are no logos, there are no campaign posters or in this cafe. It remains a public space. And this is small-scale intervention of one party. And a couple of years later, this plan was proposed for the Rue de la Loi, the Ports-en-Part. And the scale of it, I think we're somewhere here. So, I mean, anyway, this building will get demolished 10 years from now. This we know for sure. But without, I mean, for us it's a question, but it's a question whether this is the right way of trying to deal with the way Brussels should go ahead. We think that this, let's say, if each office which would come into this neighborhood would offer this kind of space, maybe the whole quartier could start to live again. And the double or nothing issue, as I said at the beginning also, and it's not double or nothing scale-wise, okay? This is our client. Some respect, please, come on. It's a fantastic client. The double or nothing is also, I mean, if the client is willing to venture into something where he doesn't know the end result per se, only a bit, then it works out quite well, we think. And even more so for a political party taking up its role. And rest assured, we are neutral. But the fact that they took up their role very seriously, that for them it was very serious, makes the project possible. And this is the last project, so just that you know. But again, this is a project which could not exist without the client. And maybe sounds like a truism, but I think a lot of projects can exist without a client because the client is so vague, so neutral, maybe so banal. And these clients, of course, these are puppets of the clients, but these clients, I refer to them as the clients who refuse any limits, and not out of luxury, but more out of the will to try to renegotiate their position in life and define what they try to do in life and use architecture, use space for that. This is the site. It's a work by Honoré Do, but it's the site. It's in a forest somewhere in Flanders. And here the brief was really bad. It was a house, it was a fermette. So it's and I remember stepping out of the car the first time we went for prospection, and I said to myself, I'm just getting again back into the car and driving away because this is silly. But we knocked on the door, we entered, we started to discuss with the two clients, and we saw some potential, maybe. So we proposed something quite radical, 2 operations. So yeah. This is the house, the footprint of the house. First thing we proposed was to wall the house, so to enclose it completely. And the second thing was to gut the house, so to empty it completely, or the center of it. Which means that we arrive at a certain kind of sequential order. So we're now inside. There's a new space which arises. This is more or less a 3-meter offset from the existing house, and a 3-meter high wall made out of steel, 12 millimeter steel. So the original plan of the house with this gutting and walling, with the idea not to enclose the house but actually to open it up to the fact that it was positioned in a forest, the fact that it was quite dark, trying to catch the light through these walls, reflecting light inside. And this is the wall, so during winter. And this is seen from its side, so it's like a sheet of paper standing straight. And here you still see a fragment of the old existing house. We also put in new larger than life almost glass panes, which could actually negotiate with the scale of these walls. And by putting this kind of contour around the house, we got almost for free, I don't know how many square meters of areas which could be programmed. So this is, for instance, the outside bathroom, which is used the whole year through. This is where you enter. So there is no front door. You have to enter through a slit of 60 centimeters through the steel wall. And then you enter into this space, and then again, there is no front door. You have to enter through this door, which slides open, but there is no key. So, and seen from outside, the enclosure often looks quite dense, although again, it's this very thin steel wall. And once you're inside, and once you actually also accept the fact that the house is walled, you accept the fact that things remember the first project, Office Plus, where if you accept that you're no longer ready to function the way you think you should function, then this house could work for you. So this suspension of disbelief works in this house for 200%. Also, the walls can be projected on, so all of a sudden you're in a kind of completely different atmosphere. And the reason why I want to show this project again is not about architecture, not at all. Even it's not architecture, but it's about using space again for the clients to trying to define their world, their spatial world, but also their mental world. And what was really intriguing, and still is, because it's still ongoing, intriguing about this project is that it's an endless project. So once we've put the wall, once we've put the glass, which can completely open up, the next phase was gently setting in, and the next phase was about thinking about furniture. But in this setting, which for me anyway, it's no longer a house, it's something else. It has in a way lost its domesticity. So you can't put a regular table, or you can't put a regular piece of furniture. And the client had a dream, which I won't explain now, but had a dream, and this is more or less the result of this dream. Of course, it didn't happen overnight. Well, maybe the dream, but not the project. And she wanted a soft surface, a non-defined soft surface. So again, we started models using different techniques of trying to make something, and it's always very confronting when you make something like this, because it's yeah, what is it? But we did a test in the office, for instance, and everybody was free to use this, and I can assure you we saw some very beautiful ways of using this kind of furniture. In a way, it's a kind of permissive surface on which you can do whatever you want. And in the atelier, the client, first time she came, and immediately she climbed up to the highest point, and with her cup of tea, she was sitting there, and it was settled. This was it, as a general principle. And even although it was still cardboard, already, let's say, the tactility of this object was present. So cardboard becoming tactile. We put the object in the space. It's a 3 by 3 meter surface. And then we started thinking, well, what is it? I mean, and how can we actually make it that it makes sense? So we were thinking about binding something soft with cloth, kind of piling up mattresses, kind of very beautiful models in a way, but again, what is it? We don't know. Going to a one-to-one scale model, very confronting, and asking the clients to use it, even more confronting, because you can't use it. But gradually we were like filtering and making this thing a reality, thinking about fabric, thicknesses, combinations, sequences. And this was, in a way, the first model where we're still not convinced, of course. This was still a very doubtful moment. But the scale of it in the space made sense. And although also the client was doubtful, we accepted the fact that they were going to use it for a couple of months, invite people, sit on it, lie on it, do things on it. And let's say trial and error methods to show how it works. But after these months, the client like, this is not it. This is, so we tried every way of using it, every angle, and actually doesn't make sense. So we started again from zero, digging up the model, and it looks even more shabby than it did before, and trying to measure, because this, we were sure this would work, the surface. So we did a very archaic way of making this 3D, then putting it into 3D, and also thinking about fabric. And there we encountered Atelier Chevalier Masson, who are geniuses in fabric, and in that sense helped us also enormously to get grip with this, in a way, small monster. So we developed a steel structure, also there, checking whether it's strong enough. And then we started weaving, or well, Chevalier Masson started weaving, making this soft surface with tubes, soft tubes, covered in textile. Making this kind of woven, enlarged textile. So again, the scale clash is there 100%. This is almost like zooming in on a piece of fabric. And yeah, this is it. I mean, it worked quite well. And it still works quite well. And once this was finished, I remember saying to the client that, and maybe I was wrong, but I said, well, now the house doesn't belong to you anymore. In a way, it has become kind of a guest house. So you should invite guests. And you also become guests in your own house. And they acknowledged this fact quite well, and they work quite well as guests in their own house. But we developed together a kind of program where we actually invite guests. So the owners leave, they are abroad or somewhere else for a day, 2 weeks, maybe half an hour. And the guests are given carte blanche. And the only thing which is asked is react to the environment you find yourself in. And the first guest was Enrique Marti, who made 2 dolls, the 2 dolls you saw at the beginning of this project. So he casted the client. And reduced it in scale, and also deformed it. This is the work of Enrique Marti. I don't know if you know the work, but this is a kind of continuation of his other puppets. But for the first time, he actually did this kind of one-to-one relationship with the clients. So puppets which are in a way hyper-real, but too small. And the work of art, or the proposal by Enrique, was actually that the clients had to live with the dolls, and this would be photographed. That's it. Second guest, Jos de Pauw and company, who actually stayed there last May. Well, no, early this month. And they acted 15 scenes of Ingmar Bergman movie, but without filming. So Herman Sorgeloos took pictures of this. And that was the work. And they also had the registration of the sound, and the DVD of this sound will remain in the house. The other thing, So the pictures, they will go also in the book, because at the moment we're making a book about the guests. And all of a sudden, I mean, like, of course, you have to be an actor, but I mean, they choose the place. This is where you actually enter the 60-centimeter slit, and this is where all the drama all of a sudden appears. So the 12 mm has never been as present before as now. Andrea Branzi, Dirk Braakman, photographer. And again, they are given carte blanche, so they can do whatever they want. They can also refuse, of course. But it's quite amazing to see how this house, well, and it's no longer a house in a way, is reinterpreted by different guests, almost by different owners, because they become owner at a certain point of the house for a certain moment. And this program now is still ongoing. So it's not, like I said, it's not about architecture, but it's about a way of living and trying to enhance this, again, this kind of double or nothing feeling. And I wouldn't recommend this to anybody else, maybe. Maybe it's so specific also for these clients. But the fact that this is possible for us is very enriching. It's also, the whole process took us 8 years. And probably we don't know how long still this will continue. I will leave you with the last guest, who is actually the dog of the house, and he will show you around. Thank you.